That morning in Los Angeles, a woman stepped into an empty field and froze. What she thought was a broken mannequin turned out to be something far worse. A young woman's body, cut in half with surgical precision, washed clean of blood, and posed like a message. She was only 22 years old. She came to Hollywood chasing dreams. Instead, she became America's most disturbing unsolved murder. The killer was never caught. The evidence disappeared. And the truth may have been deliberately buried. This is not just a murder story. This is a warning. This is the Black Dahlia. Los Angeles, January 1947. The city of dreams was waking up to another bright California morning, unaware that within hours it would become the center of one of the most disturbing crime stories in American history. The sun rose gently over empty lots and palm-lined streets, casting long shadows across a quiet neighborhood. A woman walking her child through a vacant field noticed something strange in the distance. At first glance, it looked like a discarded mannequin, pale and broken against the ground. But as she stepped closer, reality revealed itself in the most horrifying way imaginable. What lay before her was not plastic or rubber. It was human. And it would soon be known to the world as the Black Dahlia. Elizabeth Short was just 22 years old when her body was discovered, cut in half with surgical precision, drained of blood, and left posed in an eerie manner that suggested both intelligence and cruelty. Her face bore a grotesque smile carved from ear to ear, later known as the Glasgow smile. There were no signs of a struggle at the scene, no blood splatter, no immediate clues. It was as if the killer had carefully placed her there, confident, deliberate, and unafraid of being caught. From that moment on, Los Angeles would never be the same. Before she became a symbol of brutality and mystery, Elizabeth Short was just a young woman chasing hope. Born in Massachusetts during the Great Depression, her childhood was marked by instability and loss. Her father disappeared when she was young, believed to have died, leaving the family struggling to survive. Elizabeth grew up dreaming of something better, something brighter. Hollywood, with its promises of fame and glamour, felt like a calling. She wanted to be seen. She wanted to matter. Friends described Elizabeth as soft-spoken, polite, and kind. She dressed elegantly, often wearing black, which would later inspire the haunting nickname given to her by the press. Despite rumors that would follow her after death, there was little evidence she lived a reckless or criminal life. She moved frequently, staying with friends, acquaintances, sometimes strangers, always hoping that her next stop would be the one that changed everything. Hollywood, however, was not kind to dreamers like Elizabeth. Auditions led nowhere. Promises faded. Men offered attention, but rarely opportunity. She drifted between cities, relationships, and temporary homes, often lonely but still hopeful. Her letters to her mother suggested optimism, even when reality was harsh. She never admitted how close she was to the edge. In early January 1947, Elizabeth was last seen alive at a hotel bar in downtown Los Angeles. Witnesses recalled her calm demeanor, her striking appearance, and her quiet conversations. She told people she was meeting someone. Who that person was remains one of the greatest unanswered questions of the case. After that night, Elizabeth Short vanished into the city, and into history. When police arrived at the crime scene days later, seasoned detectives were shaken. The condition of the body suggested the killer had medical knowledge or experience. The lack of blood meant Elizabeth had been killed elsewhere. Her body had been washed clean, carefully posed, and transported. This was not a crime of passion. It was controlled. Cold. Intentional. The media descended instantly. Newspapers raced to outdo each other with graphic details, sensational headlines, and shocking theories. The victim was transformed from a young woman into a myth, stripped of privacy and dignity. Reporters dug into her personal life, exaggerating stories, inventing rumors, and painting Elizabeth as something she may never have been. The nickname Black Dahlia spread like wildfire, captivating the public while obscuring the truth. Meanwhile, the police investigation struggled to gain traction. Hundreds of tips flooded in. Dozens of suspects were questioned. Some confessed falsely, craving attention. Others vanished into obscurity. Letters began arriving at newspapers, allegedly from the killer himself, taunting authorities and hinting at involvement. One package contained Elizabeth's personal belongings, sent with chilling calm. The message was clear: the killer wanted to be seen. As days turned into weeks, fear gripped Los Angeles. Women walked faster. Doors locked earlier. Parents warned daughters to stay inside. The idea that someone capable of such brutality was still free haunted the city. And yet, despite massive resources, intense scrutiny, and public pressure, the case began slipping through the cracks. Elizabeth Short became more than a victim. She became a symbol of lost innocence, broken dreams, and a justice system overwhelmed by spectacle. Behind every headline was a life that ended alone, violently, and without answers. And as investigators chased leads that led nowhere, one terrifying question remained unanswered. Who killed Elizabeth Short, and why? The truth, buried beneath decades of secrets, lies, and forgotten evidence, would only grow darker from here. The discovery of Elizabeth Short's body sent shockwaves through Los Angeles, but the days that followed only deepened the horror. Detectives quickly realized this was no ordinary murder. The precision of the cuts, the complete absence of blood at the scene, and the deliberate positioning of her body pointed to something far more disturbing. Whoever killed Elizabeth had taken time. He had planned. And he had wanted the body to be found exactly as it was. Investigators traced the empty lot where Elizabeth was discovered, hoping to find witnesses or clues, but the neighborhood offered little. No one reported screams. No one noticed suspicious activity. The killer had moved through the city like a ghost. The medical examiner's report added another chilling layer: Elizabeth had likely been tortured for days before her death. She had been restrained, beaten, and slowly drained of life. This revelation shifted the case from a brutal murder to something even more terrifying: a prolonged act of cruelty. The police were under enormous pressure. Los Angeles was booming, and its image mattered. A savage, unsolved killing threatened not just public safety but the city's carefully crafted dream. Chief detectives assembled large task forces, working around the clock, questioning anyone who had crossed paths with Elizabeth in her final weeks. Friends, acquaintances, hotel staff, bartenders, former romantic interests, all were scrutinized. But Elizabeth's life was difficult to trace. She had no permanent address. She moved often. She trusted easily. Her social circle was wide but shallow. Many people remembered her face, few truly knew her. This made the investigation painfully slow. Each lead opened another door, and behind most of them, there was nothing. Then the letters began. On January 24, 1947, a package arrived at the Los Angeles Examiner newspaper. Inside were Elizabeth Short's personal belongings, her birth certificate, photographs, business cards, and address book. They had been carefully cleaned with gasoline, fingerprints wiped away. Along with the items was a note made from magazine cutouts, reading like a twisted puzzle. The sender claimed responsibility for the murder and promised more to come. The newsroom froze. This was no prank. Only the killer would have access to these items. The message was chilling not just for its content, but for its tone: calm, confident, almost playful. The sender wasn't afraid. He wanted attention. He wanted control. Police were alerted immediately. Handwriting experts, cryptographers, and behavioral analysts examined the note. They searched for patterns, meaning, anything that could lead them closer to the sender. But the letter revealed more about the killer's mindset than his identity. He was organized, intelligent, arrogant, and he was enjoying the chaos he had created. More letters followed, sent to newspapers and police, each one fueling public fear and media obsession. The killer hinted at future crimes, then went silent. No more bodies appeared. No follow-up attacks. The city waited, tense and afraid, unsure if the silence meant the danger had passed, or if something worse was coming. Meanwhile, the media transformed Elizabeth's story into a spectacle. Sensational headlines filled front pages. Reporters exaggerated her lifestyle, suggesting she was involved in dangerous relationships or criminal behavior. Rumors spread rapidly, many unverified, some completely false. Elizabeth, who could no longer defend herself, became a character in a story written by others. This media frenzy complicated the investigation. False tips flooded police stations. People claimed to have known Elizabeth intimately. Some confessed to the murder, seeking attention or suffering from delusions. Detectives were forced to sift through mountains of lies to find fragments of truth. Among the many suspects questioned was a wide range of men, doctors, soldiers, artists, businessmen, and drifters. Some had troubling pasts. Others had no clear motive. A few had medical knowledge that aligned disturbingly well with the nature of the crime. But none could be definitively linked to the murder. One suspect stood out for his disturbing fascination with the case. A man with a dark past, violent tendencies, and a history of obsession with women. He allegedly spoke openly about how he would commit such a murder, even describing details that hadn't been made public. But evidence against him was circumstantial. No fingerprints. No witnesses. No confession that held up under scrutiny. As weeks passed, public confidence in the police began to erode. People questioned whether the case would ever be solved. The killer had outsmarted the system, disappearing into the city's shadows while investigators chased ghosts. Every failure added to the myth of the Black Dahlia, turning the case into something larger than life, an unsolvable puzzle. Elizabeth's family, thousands of miles away, suffered quietly. They received false calls from reporters claiming Elizabeth was still alive, a cruel trick meant to buy time for headlines. They were fed lies and speculation instead of truth. For them, the mystery was not entertainment. It was an open wound. As the investigation dragged on, leads grew colder. Witness memories faded. Evidence degraded. The once frantic search slowed, then stalled. Officially, the case remained open, but momentum was gone. The killer had won at least one battle, time. Yet beneath the surface, the story was far from over. Hidden among the false confessions and dead ends were names that would resurface decades later. Men whose secrets were buried deep. Files that would mysteriously disappear. Evidence that was mishandled, overlooked, or ignored. The truth, it seemed, was tangled in corruption, incompetence, and fear. And somewhere, possibly watching from a distance, the person who destroyed Elizabeth Short walked free, knowing that he had created a mystery that would haunt America forever. The deeper investigators looked, the darker the story became. And the most unsettling discoveries were still ahead. As months turned into years, the Black Dahlia case slowly transformed from an active investigation into a haunting legend. Officially, it remained open, but unofficially, it had become something far more troubling, a failure. Detectives were reassigned, files were boxed away, and the city moved forward, but Elizabeth Short did not fade from memory. Instead, her story grew darker, more complex, as new theories and suspects began to emerge, many of them far more disturbing than the original crime itself. Behind closed doors, some investigators believed the truth had been dangerously close, only to slip away. Rumors spread of evidence mishandled, leads ignored, and pressure from powerful figures to steer the investigation in certain directions. Los Angeles in the 1940s was a city where influence mattered, where certain names were protected, and where secrets could be buried as easily as bodies. One of the most unsettling aspects of the case was the possibility that the killer was not a stranger to violence, but someone well known to authorities. Several suspects had backgrounds in medicine or surgery, aligning chillingly with the precise dismemberment of Elizabeth's body. The cuts were clean, deliberate, and professional. This was not the work of an impulsive criminal. It suggested training, patience, and emotional detachment. Among the names that resurfaced repeatedly was that of a doctor with a dark reputation, a man whose behavior raised red flags long before Elizabeth's murder. He was known for violent fantasies, obsession with domination, and disturbing confessions made to acquaintances. Some claimed he spoke about the murder as if he had lived it. Others said he hinted at committing the perfect crime. But when questioned, he denied involvement, and once again, there was no physical evidence to connect him definitively to the scene. Another suspect was a wealthy, eccentric man with connections to Hollywood and law enforcement. He lived close to where Elizabeth's body was found and reportedly had a history of troubling behavior toward women. Witnesses claimed he acted strangely in the days following the murder, even making cryptic remarks about it. Yet his social status shielded him. Leads involving him were quietly dropped, interviews cut short, files thinned. The idea that privilege might have protected a killer was unsettling, but not impossible. As decades passed, the case took on a second life through journalists, authors, and amateur investigators. Some believed the killer was a serial murderer responsible for other unsolved crimes. Others thought Elizabeth had been targeted specifically, chosen not at random but as part of a twisted obsession. Each theory added another layer of fear and fascination, but none delivered the closure the public desperately wanted. What made the case uniquely haunting was how personal it felt. Elizabeth's face stared out from old photographs, young, hopeful, unaware of the fate awaiting her. Unlike many crime victims reduced to statistics, she became a symbol. Her image was reprinted endlessly, her story retold in books, films, and documentaries. But with each retelling, the truth became more fragmented. Former detectives, now elderly, began speaking out. Some admitted mistakes. Others hinted at corruption. One investigator claimed that the killer's identity had been known but never officially named due to lack of evidence and fear of backlash. Another suggested that crucial documents vanished under mysterious circumstances. Whether these claims were true or the product of fading memories remains unclear, but they added fuel to an already raging fire. The most disturbing possibility was that Elizabeth's killer may have lived out his life in peace, never punished, never exposed. That thought alone kept the case alive in the public imagination. How could someone capable of such calculated cruelty simply disappear? How could justice fail so completely? For Elizabeth's family, the pain never ended. Years later, her relatives continued to search for answers, reopening old wounds with every new theory. They faced the impossible task of separating truth from myth, fact from fiction. Each supposed breakthrough raised hope, only to crush it again. The Black Dahlia case became a mirror reflecting society's darkest fears, that evil can be intelligent, patient, and invisible, that systems meant to protect can fail, that truth can be lost beneath layers of power, fear, and time. And yet, the mystery refused to die. New forensic techniques emerged. Old evidence was re-examined. DNA testing offered a glimmer of hope, but many original samples were contaminated, lost, or improperly stored. The passage of time had eroded not just memory, but possibility. The case had survived too long, outlasting the very tools that might have solved it. Still, investigators, both official and independent, kept digging. Some believed the key lay not in new evidence, but in understanding the killer's psychology. The letters, the posing of the body, the calculated cruelty, all pointed to a man who wanted recognition, who felt superior, who believed he was untouchable. A man who may have blended seamlessly into society. As Los Angeles changed, growing larger and louder, the ghost of Elizabeth Short remained. Her murder became a warning whispered through generations, a reminder that some crimes leave scars not just on victims, but on entire cities. The deeper the story went, the clearer one thing became: the Black Dahlia was not just a murder case. It was a story about obsession, failure, and the terrifying possibility that some truths are never meant to be uncovered. And as investigators followed the remaining threads, they were about to encounter revelations that would make the mystery even more disturbing than anyone had imagined. By the time the Black Dahlia case entered its second decade, it had stopped being just an unsolved murder and had become something far more unsettling, a permanent wound in the city's history. Every few years, a new theory would surface, reigniting hope that the truth was finally within reach. But each revival only deepened the mystery, revealing how much had been lost, ignored, or deliberately hidden in the years immediately following Elizabeth Short's death. One of the most troubling aspects of the investigation was how fragmented the original evidence had become. Case files were incomplete. Photographs were missing. Witness statements contradicted one another. Some reports appeared altered or rewritten. Whether this chaos was the result of incompetence, overwhelming pressure, or intentional interference remains unknown. But the result was the same: the truth became harder to reach with every passing year. In the late 20th century, a former detective's family came forward with a shocking claim. According to them, the detective had privately believed for years that a close acquaintance was responsible for Elizabeth's murder. This suspect, they claimed, possessed medical knowledge, lived near the crime scenes, and exhibited disturbing behavior toward women. Even more chilling were allegations that he had shown the detective personal items belonging to Elizabeth, items never publicly identified. Yet none of this had ever been officially documented. Why? Because, according to those close to the investigation, the suspect was protected. He had connections. He knew people with influence. And accusing him without irrefutable proof would have destroyed careers and reputations. The case, it seemed, was quietly sacrificed to preserve order. Authors and independent researchers began digging where police had stopped. They interviewed surviving witnesses, tracked down forgotten suspects, and reassembled timelines from fragments. Some uncovered patterns linking the Black Dahlia murder to other unsolved crimes involving mutilation and staged bodies. The possibility that Elizabeth was a victim of a serial killer gained traction, though no definitive link was ever established. The psychological profile of the killer became increasingly clear. This was not someone acting out of rage alone. The killer wanted to shock. He wanted control. He wanted to demonstrate superiority over both the victim and law enforcement. The careful cleaning of the body, the theatrical posing, the taunting letters, all suggested a desire to be admired, or at least feared. Perhaps most disturbing was the idea that the killer might have been watching the investigation unfold, amused by the chaos he had created. Each headline, each failed lead, would have reinforced his sense of power. And as the case faded from active pursuit, that power only grew. Elizabeth Short, meanwhile, continued to be misunderstood. Over time, the media's portrayal of her hardened into myth. She was depicted as reckless, immoral, mysterious, anything that distracted from the fact that she was a young woman who trusted the wrong people and paid the ultimate price. These portrayals served a purpose: they shifted attention away from the brutality of the crime and the failure to solve it. But those who studied her life closely saw something different. They saw a woman shaped by loss, searching for stability, holding on to hope in a city that offered none. Her story was not one of scandal, but of vulnerability. And that vulnerability may have made her a target. In the 1990s and early 2000s, advancements in forensic science sparked renewed interest. DNA testing had solved decades-old cases. Could it finally unlock the Black Dahlia mystery? Sadly, most usable evidence was gone. Mishandled, contaminated, or destroyed long before science could catch up. Once again, timing worked in the killer's favor. Still, a few promising leads emerged. Some researchers believed that handwriting analysis from the letters sent to newspapers could be matched to known suspects. Others focused on geographic profiling, identifying individuals who lived and worked within specific zones connected to Elizabeth's final movements. But without original materials, conclusions remained speculative. What made the case especially haunting was its emotional pull. Unlike many unsolved crimes, this one refused to stay buried. Each generation discovered it anew, drawn in by its cruelty and mystery. And each generation was left with the same unanswered questions. Did the police get too close to the truth and then retreat? Was justice deliberately obstructed? Or was the killer simply smarter, luckier, and more patient than anyone expected? Elizabeth Short's name became synonymous with unanswered questions. Her murder became a warning etched into the city's identity. And as time marched on, the line between history and legend blurred. But the story was not finished. Because sometimes, the most important truths are not found in evidence, but in what people tried desperately to hide. And somewhere within the shadows of Los Angeles's past, the final pieces of the Black Dahlia puzzle still waited to be uncovered. As the decades passed, the Black Dahlia murder settled into a strange place between history and nightmare. It was no longer just an unsolved case, it was a shadow that refused to lift. Every attempt to uncover the truth seemed to end the same way, close enough to feel it, but never close enough to prove it. Time had done what the killer could not, erase certainty. Elizabeth Short became immortal in a way no one would ever want. Her name echoed through books, films, documentaries, and whispered conversations about America's darkest crimes. But with each retelling, the danger of forgetting who she truly was grew stronger. Beneath the myth, beneath the sensational headlines, there remained a real young woman whose life ended violently and unjustly. Some investigators came to believe the case was never meant to be solved. Not because the truth didn't exist, but because exposing it would have caused too much damage. Too many powerful people. Too many reputations. Too many uncomfortable questions. If that was true, then Elizabeth's silence had been enforced not only by death, but by fear. In later years, a handful of former detectives quietly admitted that the Black Dahlia case haunted them more than any other. Not because of the violence, but because of the failure. They spoke of moments when the truth felt close enough to touch, only to slip away. Of suspects they believed in but could not charge. Of evidence that vanished. Of decisions they regretted. The killer, whoever he was, achieved something terrifying. He created a crime so shocking, so theatrical, that it overwhelmed the very system meant to stop him. He left behind confusion instead of clarity, fear instead of justice. And by doing so, he ensured that Elizabeth's death would never truly rest. Some believe the killer died long ago, taking his secret to the grave. Others believe he lived out a normal life, unnoticed, blending into society. The most chilling possibility is that he was never suspected at all, that the truth remains hidden not in a locked file, but in plain sight. What remains undeniable is the impact. The Black Dahlia case changed how murders were investigated, how media covered crime, and how the public consumed tragedy. It exposed the dark side of obsession, the way violence can be turned into spectacle, and victims into symbols instead of people. Elizabeth Short never received justice. No courtroom verdict. No official answers. Only endless theories and unanswered questions. Yet in some ways, remembering her story is its own form of resistance, against forgetting, against indifference, against the idea that time alone can erase truth. Her face, frozen in black and white photographs, still looks out at the world. Not as a mystery to be exploited, but as a reminder. A reminder of what happens when ambition meets cruelty. When systems fail. When truth is buried. The Black Dahlia was not a monster. She was not a myth. She was a young woman who wanted a future, and instead became a question mark in history. And perhaps that is the most unsettling part of all. Because somewhere between the lies, the lost evidence, and the silence, the truth still exists.